What's up, Lost Boys? Here we are for Fantasy Festivus Week 14. We are 14 weeks into the season, guys. We're almost there. We have 2 weeks left of the regular season. Speaking of the regular season, we had a monster week last week. So let's dive right in. We're going to talk about last week before we get to week 14. So last week, after the results, first things first, we have our first team to officially clinch a playoff spot. Josh at first place took over first place from Cass. He has clinched a playoff spot. He's up there pretty good with points, but his record is a game ahead, and no one can catch him mathematically. So there's our first spot. But let's throw that to the side. He beat Justin. That was not really close. Yada yada yada. Next game, more important games. We had some big matchups last week. We're going to start with Cass. Cass was our juggernaut all year, guys. I mean, the guy was crushing people. Teams were taking dumps against him. It wasn't even close. And then the injury started. And then this. I mean, he was even working together with Denny on the ETN trade. They're doing, back alley deals for a couple of cupcakes or something like that. And still people are injured. And it's the boom. You have Javonte Williams, you have Brees Hall, you have this. I mean, now here we are. And the juggernaut, the freight train of Steve Harvey's pants, he's in second place still. Don't get me wrong. But he's lost 3 in a row. And he sees what's happening here. Llama, learning, nipping at his heels. But more importantly, the only guy that could technically knock him out of the playoffs, realistically, Denny the Two Shoes. Start with Cass first. Pat takes Cass down this week. I picked Pat to win. Pat's team's really good. He's going to play spoiler this week. I'll get to that a little bit later. But he plays Cass. He takes him down. Cass's team's falling apart. He still put up a good amount of points this week. Cass's team's good. I mean, he's a good fantasy player. He knows what he's doing. He picked up the backup to Brees Hall, Michael Booger Knight McTitty from the Jets. Got him a bunch of points this week. So he put up a good one, but Pat's team put up more. I mean, he got a lot of that Dallas game went great. It could have been even more if the Colts put up a fight, but CeeDee Lamb's coming around, Dak Prescott's coming around. It shows you what Pat's team was supposed to look like the whole year. But that Monday night game with Tampa Bay and New Orleans, clearly, I mean, it shows you that game was pretty clear. Vegas has stuff to do with these games. Mark Ingram running out of bounds gives Tommy B a chance. There was a couple little quote unquote Las Vegas nudging people. Hey, this is the way we need this game to go. And Tom Brady has a comeback. 2 touchdowns in the last 3 minutes of the game. Cass had to be pissed. He thought he may have had a chance for his kicker to outscore Tom Brady. Didn't happen. Pat takes the dub. Cass takes the L. Falls down to 8-5. His points are going to be king. That's why I always say, I'm going to get it tattooed on my forehead. Points are king in fantasy. So Cass still has the points. He has the second most points in the league. He's got Justin beat and he's got Denny beat. And speaking of Denny, he's 1 game behind Cass, but more importantly, he's 150 points behind Cass. So that's pretty much 2 full games. There's no way Denny's really going to be able to outscore Cass by 150 points in 2 weeks. So Denny has to beat Cass in the record, which mathematically means Cass has to lose his next 2, and Denny has to win his next 2. So that's talking about Cass. Cass is on a slide right now. I bet he's freaking. Who knows how it's going to be? Anything can happen. His main threat is going to be Denny. Speaking of Denny got a huge dub this past week. He's basically been in the playoffs the last 2 weeks. He has to keep winning. Has to keep winning to keep up with Cass because he cannot beat him in points. He comes out, he smokes Barreto. Barreto's team's falling to the wayside, just is not putting enough points. His team's a little hurt. Technically, mathematically, he's still in the playoff spot at 6-7, but Justin's not going to get there. So he beats Barreto. there's not much to talk about the game. Denny's guys performed. They did what he did. He scored a lot of points. Justin's guys didn't. Um, so Denny wins. Cass loses. That's exactly what Denny needed to happen. And it is what it is. We'll see going forward. Before we get to this week's matchups, we're going to talk about the other matchup that we had last week. Um, we had Learning Computer versus the Llama and the Drama. I mean, we're talking about the second place and the third place and the fourth place teams from last week. And Llama took a dump on Romanowski. That's 2 losses in a row. 2 weeks ago, I was preaching Matt. Matt was the hottest team in the league. He was a juggernaut. He was flying in. His guys were crushing it. And then, kind of like his first round pick, Hirsch toward hair, kind of just turned into diarrhea hair. And his team's falling apart a little bit. He's still putting up a decent amount of points, don't get me wrong. But Ryan scored 188 points last week. I mean, that's a lot of damn points. He had a lot of stuff. A lot of guys hit. A lot of guys scored touchdowns for Ryan. So Ryan takes down Matt. Ryan leaps up. He's a game ahead of Matt with the 188 points from last week. He gained a lot of points on him. He's only about 30 or 40 points behind Matt now. So now you have this point glob of Josh, Cass, Matt, and Ryan. So they're all really close to each other. So it seems like for those four, the record is going to be key to see about the seeding. The outlier is Denny, and Denny can't catch any of those guys in points. So we'll see. But Ryan gets a huge dub. In my opinion, that dub almost sealed Ryan's, sign Ryan's slip to the playoffs, because Ryan, like Cass, pretty much has 2 full games up on Denny. And the difference is Ryan's team's healthy, where Cass isn't. So Ryan just has to win one of these next 2 weeks, and he's in. Well, let's get to this week's games, because that's interesting. Our game of the week is Ryan versus Cass. We have our second place team versus our third place team. This is a clinch playoff spot game. Ryan's team, fully healthy, just whooped Matt's ass, going against Cass's team, who is a dumpster fire right now. Cass is freaking, he needed that win for Monday night, and Pat smoked him those last 3 minutes. Tom Brady said, Cass, put the cigarette right on his pee hole. So Ryan is about to take down Cass. Cass's projections are still pretty good. He still has the cheat code in Kelsey. You never know what can happen. But I'm picking Ryan. Ryan's team is really, really good. They have the McCaffrey. They have the Saquon. They got all the guys. Goff gets a lot of garbage time touchdowns. And Burrow, he started out slow this year. Burrow's like the number 3, I think, number 3 or 4 fantasy quarterback on the year. So Burrow's coming around. Garrett Wilson, since they put Mike White in, has been dirty. Deebo Samuel get it going. But in general, Ryan's team is just scary as hell. It's someone you don't want to see in the playoffs. His 2 starting running backs, Amon-Ra St. Brown with the Goff connection is nasty. Flip it over to Cass's side. Tua finally played a good team. Didn't have that good a game. Kyler plays New England this week. New England usually shuts down quarterbacks pretty good. He's got ETN. He's got Knight Booger Titty Knight on the Jets. So we'll see if he can kind of step in and get Cass points. But I don't see it happening. I see Cass losing his 4th in a row. I see Ryan signing a slip to the playoffs, and he gets the dub this week against Cass. And Cass is going to be sitting, not only watching his game, but he's going to be watching this next game we're going to be talking about. And it's the Denny versus the Patty. Patty played spoiler last week on Cass, took him down. And I think it's going to happen again. I think Patty, who was Cass's worst enemy last week, is now Cass's best friend this week. Patty needs to beat Denny to basically guarantee Cass a spot. It's going to be one of those rare situations where Cass is going to lose to Ryan. Ryan's going to sign his playoff spot. Even when Cass loses to Ryan, he's going to watch Pat beat Denny. And that is also going to sign him his playoff spot. So I think after this week, even though we're going to have one more week remaining, I think our playoffs will be set. I think Pat's team's on a roll right now. It's looking really good. It's very healthy. Denny's team talking about this week, the NFL decided to schedule 6 teams on bye at this late in the season, which is ridiculous. And I bet about half of them are on Denny's roster. His whole team is on bye this week. Now, he's done a really good job of patching it together. He's still projected to put up about 130-ish points, but he lost a lot of guys this week. So it sucks for Denny to get this close to that finish line, but have all these buys come and mess up his scheduling. So I think Pat takes down Denny. I think he falls out of the playoff spot. Technically, he can still tie those other guys next week with a win, and if they lose, but the points aren't going to be there for Denny. And I think Pat plays spoiler again and crushes Denny's playoff hopes. Pat takes the dub. So we're going to look at the other 3 games we have. We'll start with Josh versus Tim. We don't really need to spend much time on this one. Tim's team is dead. They've been dead on arrival. He's last place. I guess the only thing you could talk about is him fighting with Cal and Jace and Pat for that last playoff spot to see whose team gets named last season. But Tim's by far the least amount of points. So he's one game worse than everyone else, which means he has to win games or those teams have to lose both games. So Tim's pretty much guaranteed. Last place again, Tim. Proud of you. Josh is probably going to take a Stone Cold Steve Austin stunner on your ass this week. Next, we're going to go with Justin versus Jace. Jace's team just hasn't been it all year. The Russell Wilson pick in the draft killed him. Cortland Sutton being one of his main guys killed him. He invested a lot in Denver. He invested a lot, as Najee Harris hasn't been it. We don't need to go over Jace's team. They're just not very good. And then Justin's team's kind of on the same line. Started off pretty good, was hitting strides. And then he had a couple injuries and just hasn't been able to get back on track. So I do have Jace winning this week, beating Justin. This doesn't really have any implications at all on playoffs or anything like that. So I have Jace beating Justin. And then the last game is going to be Cal versus Learning Computer. Learning Computer, he is going to be in a similar situation as Cass watching that Denny game. When Pat beats Denny, Learning Computer is going to be hitting the jackpot as well, because right now Denny and Learning Computer are tied. If Denny loses, and let's say Matt somehow loses this week, they're still going to be tied. So technically, Denny has a chance. Denny's going to be Cal's biggest fan this week. I just don't see it happening. Cal's team is a huge diarrhea fest. I mean, it is liquid, peanuts, a little bit of fur. It's nasty. And he has Lamar Jackson hurt. So it was already bad when you had Lamar, but he has bye weeks, no Lamar. Learning Computer doesn't really get affected by the buys that much. He's projected to score 160 plus points, which is ridiculous in fantasy. Learning Computer beats Cal by almost 100 points this week. I don't think it's even close. So Matt's going to cruise his way. Once Denny loses, basically Matt's going to be in the playoffs as well, because Denny won't be able to catch him in points. And going back to my previous statement, I think once Denny loses to Pat, everything else kind of falls into place. You're going to have Josh in the playoffs. He's already there, but you're going to have Cass, Matt, Ryan, all there. They're all going to be in just based on points. Yes, Denny could catch him in record next week, but it's not going to matter. And those are going to be our 4 playoff spots. It's just going to depend on points. Right now, Josh is 2 games ahead of everyone else. So if Josh wins this week against Tim, so when Josh wins this week against Tim, that clinches him the #1 seed. So that means the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place teams are all just jockeying to see who's playing who. And honestly, it's looking like it's tricky. I'm sure Josh is rooting for Cass to keep losing, because if he plays, above those 3 teams, Josh wants to play Cass. His team's injured, his team's banged up, and he's by far the easiest matchup. He wants to see Matt and Ryan battle it out in the first round. So Josh is also rooting for Llama to beat Cass this week. So we'll see. Playoffs, obviously, we have 2 more weeks. Who knows how the seeding is going to be, but I think after this week, all 4 of those teams are going to be set. Like I thought was going to happen a couple weeks ago. Pat playing spoiler right now. Did it to Cass last week. Going to do it to Denny this week, which is irony. That Cass and Denny are fighting. You know, they had that trade earlier in the year, and then Pat comes in and knocks Cass down. Now he's going to come in and knock Denny back down. Pat's playing equalizer. So fantasy league's fun. Even when you're not in the playoffs, you can still have some fun, and Pat's showing that right now. So it's been a fun year, guys. We still have 2 more weeks. You never know what can happen. Injuries can happen still going into the playoffs. You never know. We could have a, Quinton Ganther, or as Cass would like to say, Quinton motherfucking Ganther situation from about a decade ago, where guys just pop up and cruise to the playoffs. So anything can change. Who knows who the playoff stars are going to be? But it's looking like our 4 playoff guys are going to be set after this week, and we only have 1 more week after that. So it's been fun, boys. We got 1 more week. Go Chiefs, go Bears as usual, and have a wonderful day, my friends.